Thank you for watching this real story from America's dark history. If this story touched your heart and made you think, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more untold, true stories that history tried to forget. Your support helps keep these real stories alive, and if you believe this story deserves to be heard, share it so others can learn, remember, and reflect. Thank you for watching. The American Civil War did not begin with cannons alone. It began with fear, with whispers, with generations of pain carried silently on the backs of the enslaved. In the early spring of 1861, on a tobacco plantation near the Virginia border, life moved under the shadow of cruelty. The land was rich, but the people forced to work it were treated as less than human. Among them was a young enslaved woman who gave birth in a wooden shack behind the main fields, her screams swallowed by the night so the master's house would not be disturbed. Her child, a boy, entered the world with no name, no rights, and no promise of tomorrow. She called him Elias, a name she whispered like a prayer, hoping it might protect him in a world that offered none. That same night, beneath a collapsing barn where rusted chains hung from beams like ghosts, a hunting dog gave birth to a litter of pups. She was owned by the plantation, trained to track runaways, to hunt human beings whose only crime was wanting freedom. One pup, smaller than the rest and dark as charcoal, crawled away from the warmth of his mother and whined into the empty night. Drawn by instinct, the puppy doctor agged himself toward the faint sound of a baby crying nearby. When the enslaved woman noticed him, she tried to shoo him away in fear of punishment, but the puppy returned again and again, curling near the child whenever he could. Elias reached out with tiny fingers and grabbed the pup's ear. From that moment they were bound. As Elias grew, he learned the rules of survival early. He learned when to lower his eyes, when to remain silent, when to run. He learned that pain could arrive without warning, delivered by a whip or a fist, and that crying only invited more. Ash, named so because of his dark coat and soot-covered appearance, grew beside him, watching everything. Dogs were trained to obey white men, but Ash never learned that lesson fully. He followed Elias through the fields, through the quarters, through the nights filled with hushed conversations about escape and freedom. When overseers approached, Ash stiffened. When voices rose in anger, he growled low, a warning only Elias seemed to understand. The plantation was a place of routine cruelty. Families were separated without explanation. Children vanished overnight, sold south. Elias saw his mother work until her hands bled. Yet she still sang softly to him at night, songs from a homeland she had never seen but felt in her bones. Ash listened too, his head resting on Elias's knees, eyes half closed, absorbing a tenderness the world denied them. In those moments, the war that newspapers spoke of felt distant, unreal, but the tension was everywhere. White men argued loudly about states' rights and ownership, about WEC. The slavery should be protected or destroyed. None of them asked what the enslaved wanted. When the first soldiers marched through nearby towns, the plantation buzzed with fear. Confederate patrols grew harsher, more paranoid, convinced enslaved people would rise up or flee to Union lines. Whips cracked more often. Punishments became public, meant to terrify. Elias watched a man barely older than himself dragged back after attempting escape, his back torn open as an example. Ash barked wildly, pulling at his chain until blood seeped from his neck. The overseer struck him, calling him a useless beast. From that day on, Ash was considered dangerous. At night, Elias slept lightly. Ash pressed against him like a shield. The dog learned the sounds of boots on dirt, of rifles clicking, of horses snorting in the dark. More than once, Ash's low growl woke Elias, just in time to hide when patrols searched for runaways. In the silence between heartbeats, Elias realized something powerful. The dog understood fear and loyalty better than any man who claimed authority over them. As war crept closer, rumors spread among the enslaved, stories of Union soldiers who freed slaves, of black men who escaped and joined the fight. Hope became both fuel and danger. Elias's mother warned him never to trust promises spoken by men with guns. She had lived long enough to know freedom was often delayed, denied, or taken back by force. Ash listened, ears twitching, sensing the fear in her voice even when her words were calm. One evening, Confederate soldiers arrived unexpectedly, searching for escape. Laborers from a neighboring plantation. They questioned everyone, their eyes cold, their fingers never far from triggers. When one soldier approached Elias too closely, Ash stepped forward, teeth bared. The moment froze. For a second it felt like history itself paused. Then the soldier laughed and kicked Ash aside. Elias did not cry out. He learned another lesson that night. Love had to be hid. End to survive. Gunfire echoed in the distance more frequently as months passed. Smoke sometimes stained the horizon. The war was no longer a story. It was a presence. Food grew scarce as supplies were diverted to soldiers. The enslaved were fed less, worked more. Elias grew thin, his childhood stolen by labor. Ash hunted rats and scraps, sharing whatever he found, dropping it at Elias's feet with quiet pride. In a land that taught domination, the dog practiced generosity. When the plantation owner fled to join the Confederate Army, chaos followed. Overseers grew brutal, desperate to maintain control. One drunken night, a fire broke out near the quarters. Screams filled the air. Ash ran back and forth, barking, pulling Elias away from falling beams, guiding others through smoke. In the fusion, several enslaved families escaped into the woods. Elias wanted to follow, but his mother held him back. Not yet, she whispered. Survive first. Days later she was gone, sold, moved, or killed, no one knew. Elias never learned the truth. He waited nights for her return, Ash beside him, until waiting became another kind of pain. The boy was alone now, except for the dog, in that lone line. Ash became more than protection. He became memory, family, and proof that loyalty could exist without ownership. As 1861 dragged on, the sound of war drew closer, and Elias sensed that his life was standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying. Ash stood with him, silent and alert, staring toward the distant thunder of cannons. Neither understood politics, flags, or speeches. They understood only survival, fear, and an unbreakable bond forged in a world determined to crush them. Before the first battle reached their land, before freedom and violence collided fully, a boy born into chains and a dog trained to hunt humans stood together at the edge of history. Two souls the nation would never record, yet whose story was already etched in blood, loyalty, and the dark beginning of America's most painful chapter. When the war finally swallowed the plantation whole, it did not arrive like a heroic march from the history books. It came as confusion, hunger, smoke, and the constant fear of being killed by the wrong uniform. One morning, Elias woke to silence so deep it felt unnatural. No overseer shouting, no bells calling people to the fields. Ash stood rigid, ears forward, sing what Elias could not yet see. By noon it became clear. The white owners had fled during the night, leaving behind empty houses, broken locks, and terrified people who suddenly realized they were free in name only. Freedom, Elias learned quickly, was dangerous when no one was there to protect it. Confederate patrols roamed the countryside, hunting runaways and accusing any black person without papers of being a spy. Union scouts appeared too, but they were strangers with rifles, and their kindness was uncertain. Elias and Ash stayed hidden at first, surviving on stolen corn and creek water. The woods became their shelter, but also their prison. Every snapped twig sounded like death. One afternoon, Ash began barking in a way Elias had never heard before. Not a warning, not fear, but urgency. Moments later, blue-uniformed Union soldiers emerged from the trees. Rifles were raised instantly. Elias froze. He had been taught all his life that white men with guns decided who lived and who died. A soldier shouted for him to come forward. Ash stepped in front of Elias, growling, refusing to move. The soldiers laughed nervously, calling the dog brave or stupid. One said, almost casually, "That animal's got more loyalty than half this country." They argued about what to do with Elias. Some wanted to send him away. Others saw him as useful. In the end, usefulness won. Elias was forced to guide them through terrain he barely knew, marching past burned farms and shallow graves. He saw white soldiers bleeding beside black soldiers, all equal in pain, none equal in respect. Ash follow. Wed every step, ignored by command, surviving on scraps and instinct. Battlefields shattered any illusion Elias had about heroism. The first one they crossed was still warm. Bodies lay twisted, eyes open, faces frozen in shock. Ash sniffed the air and whimpered softly. Elias felt something inside him break. He was just a boy, yet the war demanded he become older in minutes than most men ever will. Racism did not vanish under the Union flag. Elias was ordered to carry supplies, fetch water, clean wounds, always useful, never valued. Some soldiers spoke kindly, others spat insults. Ash reacted to tone more than words. When voices rose in hatred, his body stiffened. When hands moved too fast, he bared his teeth. More than once, he was nearly shot for it. Elias learned to pull him back. Whiz. Paring calm into his fur, afraid that loyalty would cost Ash his life. One night, Confederate forces ambushed the camp. Chaos erupted. Gunfire split the dark. Elias ran, carrying bandages, tripping over roots and bodies. A blast knocked him to the ground. Pain exploded in his side. He screamed once, then couldn't breathe. Ash found him immediately, barking wildly, dragging at his clothes. Blood oaked the dirt. Soldiers ran past them, too busy surviving to notice a dying black boy. Ash did not leave. He grabbed Elias's sleeve and pulled, inch by inch, away from the noise. When soldiers approached, Ash growled like something feral, standing over Elias's body. Two men raised rifles, then hesitated. Something about the dog's refusal made them pause. They moved on. Ash stayed awake through tea. He night, licking Elias's wound, pressing against him to keep him warm, snarling at every shadow. Elias drifted in and out of consciousness, certain he would die there, nameless and forgotten. But morning came. A medic finally noticed him. Elias survived, though the scar never left his body or his memory. No medal marked Ash's vigilance. No record noted that a dog had saved a life the nation didn't care to save. After that, Elias was slower, weaker, but Ash never adjusted his pace. He waited. He watched. He guarded. Through marches and retreats, Ash learned the language of war, the sound of an incoming charge, the smell of fear, the silence before death. He became invisible, tolerated but never thanked. As months passed, Elias realized something painful. This war was not being fought foe. It was being fought over him. Freedom was a word spoken loudly but applied quietly, selectively. He saw black men fight bravely, only to be ordered to the back. He saw Confederate prisoners treated better than freed slaves. And through it all, Ash remained constant, untouched by flags or lies. During one retreat, Confederate soldiers captured several black camp followers. Elias was among them. A noose was prepared. Accusations were shouted. Ash lunged without hesitation, teeth sinking into flesh, fighting men 3 times his size. Gun butts smashed into him. Bones cracked. But the delay was enough. Union fire forced the Confederates to flee. Elias collapsed beside Ash, holding him, sobbing silently. Ash survived, barely. He limped afterward, his body marked by scars that told a story no one would write down. Elias understood then that loyalty had a cost, and Ash was paying it willingly. By the time the war shifted decisively, Elias was no longer just surviving it. He was witnessing the truth behind it, a nation tearing itself apart while still refusing to see him as human. Yet beside him walked a creature who never questioned his worth, in the blood-soaked chaos of CA's civil war, where ideals clashed and racism endured. A dog stood guard over a boy history tried to erase. Between Union blue and Confederate gray, between freedom promised and freedom denied, Ash chose his side, not based on color, not on power, but on love. When the war ended, it did not announce itself with peace. It arrived quietly, unevenly, and cruelly. The guns fell silent, but the hatred that fueled them remained alive, waiting for new shapes. Elias learned this the hard way. Word spread that slavery was over, that chains were broken, that a new America had been born. Yet for people like him, freedom felt like stepping into a land where no one wanted you alive. Plantations lay in ruins, but the men who once ruled them returned with bitterness burning in their chests. Laws changed. On paper, but not in hearts. Former Confederate soldiers roamed the countryside, angry, humiliated, and dangerous. They blamed black people for their defeat. They blamed freedom for their loss. And they carried that blame with ropes, rifles, and fire. Elias tried to leave the military camps, believing that survival now meant finding honest work and building a life. He walked along dirt roads with Ash beside him, limping slightly but still alert, eyes scanning every tree line. They found farms willing to pay almost nothing for brutal labor. Elias worked from dawn until night, slept in barns or abandoned sheds, and accepted insults as part of his wages. Ash stayed near, chasing away threats when he could, growling softly when strangers lingered too long. Freedom came with hunger, with no LA. ND, no protection, and no money. Elias lived one insult away from violence. White men demanded proof that he was free, as if freedom were a document instead of a human right. Some nights, riders passed nearby, masked figures on horses, torches in hand, laughter echoing like madness. Ash sensed them before Elias ever heard them. His warning barks became the difference between escape and death. One evening, Elias arrived in a small town looking for work. He entered a general store, careful, polite, eyes down. The owner accused him of stealing without evidence. The accusation spread instantly, fueled by long-held hatred. Men gathered outside. Words turned into threats. Someone said an example needed to be made. Elias understood what that meant before the rope appeared. They dragged him to a tree at the edge of town. Ash fought wildly, biting and snapping, but was kicked aside again and again. Elias's hands were tied. His heart pounded not just with fear, but with the realization that freedom had not changed the rules. It had only removed the illusion of protection. Ash broke free at the last moment. He charged into the crowd with a sound that was more scream than bark, teeth flashing, body colliding with legs and hands. Men shouted. Someone fired a shot. Ash didn't stop. He bit, tore, and lunged with everything he had left. The rope fell. Elias stumbled back, coughing, gasping, disbelief flooding his veins. But Ash paid for it. A rifle struck his side. Another blow crushed his ribs. Someone kicked him hard enough that he skidded across the dirt. Elias screamed, dragging himself toward him as shots rang out, forcing the crowd to scatter when distant riders approached. The mob fled, leaving silence behind. Ash lay still. Elias crawled to him, hands shaking, pressing against blood-soaked fur. Ash's eyes opened once, just enough to see Elias's face. His tail twitched weakly. He tried "Oh, stand," and failed. Elias whispered his name over and over, begging him not to leave, promising things he could never give. Ash died there, beneath the same sky that had watched them survive war, hunger, and hatred together. Elias buried him at dawn beneath an oak tree, using his bare hands, the soil cutting into his palms. He marked the tree with Ash's name, carved slowly, carefully, as if carving it into history itself. No one came to mourn. No record noted that a loyal dog had died saving a freed black man from lynching. America moved on without noticing. Elias moved on too, because survival demanded it. But something inside him had changed forever. The world felt emptier, colder. The one being who had never questioned his worth was gone. In a nation that claimed to have ended slavery, Elias understood that mercy was still rationed by race. He found work eventually, then lost it. He learned to trust no promise made by men who benefited from his silence. He carried Ash's memory like a scar, painful, permanent, and unseen. When riders passed, Elias still listened for paws that were no longer there. When fear crept in, he remembered the dog who had stood against hatred without H. Hesitation. Years passed, laws tightened. Segregation replaced chains. Violence became more organized, more acceptable, more hidden behind authority. Elias survived not because America protected him, but because he learned to disappear when necessary. He told children stories of a dog who knew loyalty better than people, who chose love in a land ruled by cruelty. Ash never appeared in books. He ever earned a statue or a song. But his sacrifice revealed a truth darker than war itself, that even after slavery ended, black lives were still considered expendable, and sometimes only an animal was willing to fight that lie with everything it had. In the so-called Age of Freedom, mercy did not arrive with the law. It arrived once, briefly, in the form of a wounded dog who refused to walk away. Elias lived long enough to see the word freedom change its meaning many times, yet never fully belonged to him. Years after Ash was buried beneath the oak tree, Elias still returned there whenever he could. The town around it grew slowly, new fences, new roads, new laws, but the tree remained, its bark scarred by a single name that meant more to Elias than any flag or anthem. He would place his hand against the carving, and feel the past rise up like a ghost, reminding him that survival had once come from loyalty rather than justice. America was eager to forget the war. Politicians spoke of unity. Newspapers praised progress. But Elias saw a different truth. The uniforms were gone, yet the fear stayed. Chains were replaced with rules, and whips with laws that punished existence itself. He heard as black men were arrested for walking too slowly, speaking too loudly, or standing in the wrong place. He watched children inherit fear the same way white children inherited land. This was not the end of darkness, it was its evolution. Elias worked where he could, often moving before roots could grow. Each town promised opportunity and delivered suspicion. He learned that silence kept him alive. He learned to step aside, to shrink, to never challenge a white man's word. Freedom demanded obedience. Ash had never learned that lesson, and sometimes Elias wondered if that was why the dog's loyalty felt purer than anything human society offered. At night, Elias dreamed of paws on dirt, of a familiar weight beside him, of a low growl warning him to wake. He would open his eyes to emptiness, his chest tightening with the realization that the one soul who had guarded him without condition was gone. The loneliness never left. It aged with him. As decades passed, the stories of the Civil War hardened into myth. Children were taught about brave generals and noble causes, not about boys forced to guide soldiers through death, or dogs beaten for protecting black lives. Elias told his story only when asked, and even then, he softened it. People did not want truth. They wanted comfort. They wanted heroes who looked like themselves. He noticed how easily history erased what it found inconvenient. Slavery became a chapter, not a wound. Racism became a problem, not a foundation. Loyalty, when shown by someone without power, became invisible. Elias understood that Ash's story would never be written because it challenged too much. It revealed that morality did not always belong to those who claimed authority. When Elias grew old, children sometimes gathered to hear him speak. He told them about war, about fear, about survival. But when he spoke of Ash, his voice changed. He described a dog who did not care about skin color, who did not need laws to tell him right from wrong. He told them that sometimes love came from unexpected places, and sometimes courage arrived on 4 legs. Some children listened closely. Others laughed, unsure why an old man spoke of a dog as if he were family. Elias did not mind. He knew understanding could not be forced. Ash had taught him that loyalty was not about being remembered. It was about choosing to stay when leaving would be safer. Near the end of his life, Elias returned one last time to the oak tree. Its roots had grown thick and strong, breaking through the soil like veins. He sat beneath it, feeling the weight of years press down on him. America had changed again, new promises, new speeches. But the old fears still echoed in quieter forms. He wondered if the nation would ever confront its reflection honestly. Elias placed his hand over the carving, now worn by time, and spoke softly. He thanked Ash, not just for saving his life, but for showing him what humanity looked like when stripped of power and prejudice. In a country built on division, a dog had shown unity. In an age of cruelty, a creature trained for violence had chosen protection instead. When Elias died, there was no headline, no memorial. His name faded like so many others. But the oak tree remained, standing over a story America never told. Beneath its branches lay the memory of a boy born into chains and a dog who refused to see him as anything less than family. That is the darkest truth of America's past, not only the violence it inflicted, but the way it forgot those who endured it. History remembers generals, battles, and laws. It forgets loyalty that did not fit its narrative. Yet somewhere in that forgotten space, Ash's story still lives, not as a symbol of war, but as proof that even in the deepest shadows of racism and cruelty, compassion existed. It simply did not come from where the nation expected it to. Please support the channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing this video. Your support truly means a lot and helps us continue bringing you real, untold stories from history. If this story moved you or taught you something new, please share it so others can hear these voices too. Thank you so much for watching and for your support.